All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Lawyers Who Stream, episode 1 of season 2, returning to twitch.tv after a summer hiatus. New format, new graphics, and one returning guest, one brand new. We have Zach Battiston and Chad Haggerty, our favorite frenemies from Law Twitter. Land acknowledgement to start off. The show is streamed and recorded on the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is today inhabited by many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, as it has been long before settlers arrived on Turtle Island. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So we are coming here together today because, well, Zach and Chad are friends, and they both practice
Hey, hey,
in.
hey, hold that. Hold that.
We're gonna start spicy already. Okay. Um,
Always.
Sorry, you were saying Zach
uh,
and Chad are dislike each other and
yeah,
Chad's
they.
doing great and Zach works for the government.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes, not all the time.
Sometimes he's more of a mercenary, is how I think of him, honestly.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. But how about I just let you guys introduce yourselves? Chad, we'll start with you.
Oh, sure.
Yep, and then Zach, you can introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the program.
Yep, the best should go first. So I think that's good content formulation and management. Um, Definitely not the best. My name is Chad Haggerty. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Alberta. I graduated in 2019 and just started my own practice about 4 months ago. Um, so far, so good. Rolling well. Um, yeah, I'm sure we'll get into more details as we go along. I had other things. Was RCMP for 17 years before I decided to make better life decisions and go to law school and work on defending people from the abuses of the state. But and with that, Zach knows more about that side of it, so I'll switch to him.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm returning guest here, fortunately. Those of you who've listened before, you've either caught me on the stream or I'm the other half of the voice at Legal Listening. Uh, Graduated from law school 2 years ago. I'm in Windsor. I kind of do a split practice at the firm that I work at. So half of our work, or half of my work really, is public prosecution work, and then the other half is general civil litigation. Kind of like Chad, I was in the military and I made better life choices, as Chad would have said, got out, went to law school. And that's basically kind of like what brings, me here today.
Yeah, so actually, I did want to kind of start off on that, talking a little bit about your work history, sort of pre-law school, but also want to note anyone in the chat if this is sort of a new setup that we have going on. If there are any audio issues, video issues, just let us know, and I'll try to fix them as quickly as possible. But yeah, Chad, how about you tell me a little bit about your time in the RCMP, as much as you'd like to share, and
Yeah, by all
how
means.
and how that has shaped your not only how you practice law, but also if any of those life experiences kind of transferred in making you an effective advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share all of it.
Mhm.
The So I was in the RCMP for 17 years. I joined when I was 20-ish. Um, Most of it was good. I'm from a small northern Alberta Indigenous community, a Métis settlement. Um, didn't really deal with police when I was a kid. They didn't do community policing where I lived. They came out, they arrested somebody, they left. Wanted to be a lawyer, but we were uh, whatever's below poor. That was our financial bracket.
Mhm.
So I couldn't afford to go to law school back in the day. And contrary to a lot of beliefs, just because you're Indigenous, you don't get your education paid for. So I joined the RCMP because you got paid to do that. For most of my time, I was working First Nations communities. Got to see a lot of the same stuff that I grew up with. And unfortunately, Indigenous communities deal with a lot of trauma. My grandmother was in a residential school, so my family didn't escape that. And when I was policing, I dealt with trauma there as well.
Mhm.
And I mentioned it a couple of times because trauma was a big part of the policing experience. Shot at and stabbed and attacked with every manner of weapon or quasi weapon you could think of. Didn't deal with the trauma, um, and as can expect, I I lashed out at the people around me. And one night I grabbed my wife and ended up charged with assault. Um, I knew I grabbed her. I pled guilty. Um, Eventually got a conditional discharge.
Mm.
And it was around that time, before the charges were laid, I started therapy and spent 2.5 years, a couple hours every 2 weeks on my therapist's couch, um, or chair, and realized that I wasn't emotionally cut out to be a police officer anymore. I couldn't deal with the trauma. I couldn't be effective in that role. Um, so went back to my childhood dream, law school, and somehow that path progressed, and I was successful at it, and lots of support, lots of mentorship, and lots of hard work. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, that's quite a amazing story. I think I'd heard it a bit before, but never laid out quite like that. And it's really it's been quite the journey. And I want to return to the subject of trauma and the law, and specifically vicarious trauma while lawyering. But first, Zach, I'll let you
Absolutely.
also tell your story, where you came from, starting in the military.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty tough act to follow up. Chad obviously has a little bit more history than I do around this great green and blue ball of ours. But what was
That's the
going on with
nicest I've
me
ever been
was
called
I
old,
was
Zach.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was trying to keep it like it's like a backhanded compliment, right? It's nice on top, and then you think about it for a minute. So, anyways, I was just a second year university student, and joining the military was something that I kind of always wanted to do, but wasn't really sure like how to go about it or kind of what my career path would turn out to be.
Mm,
So I joined, great way to pay for school. They employed you throughout the summer. It kind of like all made sense. And I was like, all right, I like the outdoors, it'll work. So I did, the whole process. I went through and I was commissioned officer because I was a university student, which is kind of the direction they push you in. And went through, got all my phase training, and I got trained all the way up to like what's referred to as a fully qualified lieutenant. And I was in charge of an infantry platoon. And it was a lot like Chad's in a lot of ways where the experiences I had, there were a lot of positive experiences, but there's also, a lot of parts of, that culture that weren't like really good for me. And I think like I talk about it all the time, kind of like my journey, but like coming into law school and how much it's changed me in the opposite direction that the military did. Because, that environment, their focus is to teach you to kill, and like that's what you sign up for. And the accessories that kind of go along with that, they turn you kind of away from things like empathy and like like wanting to be open and expressive with others. And so
mhm,
it got to the point where at the time my girlfriend, now wife, was like, you're not really that same person you were before you joined. She was worried about how much time I was spending because I'd be gone all summer. So she was always kind of bummed out she couldn't hang out with me.
right.
And then like she was raising these concerns to me. And then I noticed like this pattern of like the military was really pushing me. They wanted me to stay. And I thought my life could go in a different direction. And I kind of followed up on this law school thing because I didn't get in the first time I applied. And so it was my wife who told me to apply the second time. So, anyways, I apply, I get in, and then I kind of see myself at the proverbial fork in the road. And I was like, really, I'm kind of left with two choices. Either I can do the military thing, and that can kind of be, the next stage for me, or I
Mhm,
can switch gears and kind of stay in the university stream and stay doing that. And so I chose the law route because that's what I really wanted to do. So I think it's good for me. I had a good experience. I'm lucky to say that I've got friends from coast to coast now, which is pretty cool. Like when I went up to Winnipeg, I met up with one of my old army buddies, and that was
mhm.
nice. So yeah, there's some good experiences, some negative ones, but I think I'm better off where I am now for sure.
That's great. Well, both of you made some very positive life moves. It sounds like coming to law school. I know, speaking personally, it definitely was a good move for me. Taught me a lot about myself and what I want to do. But Chad, I wanted to return to what you mentioned about not being sort of psychologically, I guess, cut out for RCMP work and the trauma involved there. You are now a criminal defense lawyer, and you deal with clients every day who have a lot of trauma in their personal lives. How do you, I guess, try to mitigate the effect of vicarious trauma and hearing their stories on your own life?
There are a couple of things. The first strategy is that I do practice mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. I
Mhm.
try to be aware of where my stress levels are, how I'm managing. I have mentors and friends that check in with me, um, and and I do make sure that there is some balance in my life. Now, everybody talks about work life balance, like there's some percentage that should be assigned to either one, and the reality, sometimes work takes 90%, and sometimes family takes 90%,
Mhm.
and that's as it should be. Um, but making sure that I deal with my mental health is primary. And Zach will know this from his experience in the military, and because you do a lot of first response. The first thing you have to do when you're going into a dangerous situation is take care of yourself, because if you don't, you become a burden on the people around you, and you're useless. You can't do the task you're assigned to do. And I think that's the same here. So I still have a psychologist that I see. I don't see as often anymore. I go when when things are getting to be too high. The people in my circle know that well, everybody knows I have a psychologist because I talk about it frequently, and I do, and I don't mind if people say, hey Chad, have you been to see your psychologist lately? Um, I mean, a random person on the street, maybe I'll take a little offense, but the people in my circle, they know that when I'm my 13-year-old is fantastic at it. Dad, did you eat today? Dad, did you get enough sleep? Dad, do you need to see your psychologist? I'm not even kidding, but it's important because, yeah, in this job we do deal with vicarious trauma, and um, a lot of times our clients are accused of of acts that are difficult to deal with. But when you talk to the client, very often, uh, I can't say every single time, but darn near, um, we've got our clients, their life stories. I've been in court laying out the antecedents of my client. I know we're not supposed to be emotional; it's supposed to be dispassionate. But I remember two specific incidents where I'm going through, in both cases, Gladue factors, and I got choked up talking about it. Um,
Mhm.
and my thought on that was, if you don't get choked up relaying some of the stories that we hear and some of the antecedents, some of the life stories of our clients, maybe you need to do a check-in because they're tragic. and
Totally agree.
and I think our clients deserve to be recognized for their humanity, and sometimes that's difficult to speak to, and speak about.
Mhm. So Zach, being often on the other side of the courtroom that Chad would be on, looking at the stories of the accused and looking at kind of the circumstances of cases, you're obviously looking over similar fact patterns. How do you kind of take care of yourself, and how do you bring empathy to your own practice, um, as it is?
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that I kind of focus to stay mindful of what I'm doing is like I kind of have that similar experience as Chad. Kind of, before you're gonna really, it doesn't even have to be like a crisis task. If you're starting something, like if I'm switching gears from best example, I'm going from civil to the crim side of things, right? Like I kind of take stock of myself and I go, okay, am I ready to do the crim work today? Because as Chad said, it can be reading some of the fact patterns for me. I mean, again, just disassociated being on the other side, and I'm just reading them on the reams of white paper. So I try and be mindful though, and remember that, as much as this is just a story on a paper, that there are lots of human lives involved and at stake in this, right? And that it's not a position to be taken lightly, and like constantly keeping myself aware that even though not my client, I'm not meeting them, there's still lots of people at play here, and their lives are now at the whims of the criminal justice system. And
Hmm.
we learn all about that in law school. Lots of discussion on Twitter about that system too, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting, the position I play, and I'm thankful that I do. But I definitely keep myself mindful that these are cases about real people, and they're not just disassociated, disembodied people or ghosts, so to speak.
Right. And the accused aren't the only ones in the room either with a stake in this case. I mean, you deal with witnesses all the time, I'm sure. Do you have anything, what's sort of your best practices in going in to interview a witness or examine a witness on the stand that might have experienced a traumatic event?
So I mean, from my perspective, unfortunately, I haven't had much experience with a lot of that. Just the nature of the work that I do, it's fairly technical. The public prosecution service work, at least
Mm,
in Windsor, because it's more about like the technical aspects of the federal offenses that we kind of look at.
right.
So
Maybe you should
from my
actually
perspective,
maybe just clarify what sort of work you do as a part of the Public Prosecution Service of Canada,
yeah.
as opposed to like a
So
typical Crown prosecutor, in the provincial court.
yeah, absolutely. So we're delegated to prosecute all non-criminal code offenses. And so living in Windsor, a portion of that is like Customs Act, Excise Act, those kind of things.
Hmm.
And then the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act as well kind of makes up another portion of the practice. And so from like the technical side of things, everything under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, burden of proof for proving possession for the purpose of trafficking, similar to Cannabis Act. And on the flip side, on the Customs Act stuff, it's all about proving just like the Customs Act is kind of weird, as I've learned, and the Excise Act is kind of weird, and it requires like a lot of mathematical and technical thinking that are like the officers at the border understand and can like explain to me like how trucks are loaded, because like that kind of stuff, I was like, I have no frame of reference how to load a semi truck filled with car parts. So it's kind of like those things, like that's sort of like the technical side comes for me. And so it's not like these are like victimless crimes or not open to trauma, but just kind of where I'm at in my practice, I'm starting kind of more on like these like lower end technical criminal offenses, like a lot of CBSA work, which is good, and it's a good learning experience for me. So I think Chad's probably pretty primed to answer the question about witnesses.
Chad, did you want to talk about witnesses a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're being mindful of the fact that the primary the primary function of a defense lawyer is to advocate on behalf of their client. You do have to challenge witnesses. Now, although I haven't been in practice that long, I have had opportunities, not many, but in my last career, when I was policing, my approach to complainant statements was to challenge them because I needed to know if it was true. And I did have files where complainants lied to me and people got arrested and remanded, and then the lie was outed afterwards, and trying to scramble to find, to get a detainee out of remand on a Saturday is no fun. It's scary. Or at least it was scary for me. So you have to be mindful of the trauma, and there's a way to do things. And the old adage about more flies with honey, although I think that adage has its issues, it's true. I mean, you can be respectful without being deferential, and I mean, just understanding that approaching things from a trauma informed view, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily tiptoeing around things. It just means that you're doing things in a way that demonstrates respect. And I'm a young lawyer, but I'm an old person, as Zach already referenced. And the reality is, if you approach people respectfully, your odds of getting positive results are generally higher. I mean, that's just human nature. That's not law. That's just human nature. So
I think we're starting to move away from the stereotype of the like shark defense lawyer who's going after the witness. I mean, that's never really worked all that well, but it's also, it's flashy for TV and everything. I know people have grown up thinking that's what lawyers do, but I think
there's
that's.
definitely
Mhm.
there's definitely a time for that. I mean,
Yeah.
I time recently we're cross-examining an RCMP officer, same job I did for 17 years.
Mm.
I was a complete dick. Can I say dick? Yeah,
I
I
think you
was
can
a
say
complete.
dick. Yeah, you're allowed to swear on here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was a complete dick to him. I was a polite jerk, but I was a complete jerk to him, no question. And it was so much fun. And during cross-examination, having him say, I don't know what integrity is gonna be one of my favorite moments for a long time. So I mean, you can still be forceful. You can still be a jerk, a polite respect, a polite jerk, if that makes sense. And yeah, the adage, the image or impression of defense lawyers as sharks. I mean, there are portions of society that'll always have that. The reality is, that defense lawyers are, I always see my role as, standing against making sure that the power of the state is kept in check. And the nice thing about having somebody like Zach on the other side, Zach, I'm giving you a compliment. I'm glad you're sitting. Hold on.
Man, I gotta be careful.
One of the things that's been pointed out to me frequently is while defense lawyers might be the last bastion against the overreach of the state, and when it works properly, the first defense against overreach of the state is an informed crown, and a crown that's ascribing to their duty. And I know that people like Zach and many of the prosecutors I know here in Calgary absolutely take that seriously. Now, is that the case everywhere? Of course not, but in a perfect world it is. And if people think defense lawyers are sharks, so be it. That's fine.
Yeah. I guess the smart thing to do is know when something turns to a point where you need to be a little more adversarial, a little more forceful, being smart about that.
Absolutely. We're really lucky in Calgary, and from talking to Zach, we've got a very collegial criminal bar in Calgary.
Windsor, similar reputation.
Yeah, we have a really good bar down here. I'm really lucky. I mean, I could pick up the phone and call any of the other counsel from either defense or other Crown's office in the area too, and they're fast to respond. Everybody, for the most part, gets along very cordially, and it's good because it doesn't make me feel like I'm so much of an outsider, because that's kind of been an aspect with practicing during COVID. Like all the time, all the lawyers, I can't wait to get back to the courthouse. Well, I've never had that experience, so I don't know. But knowing now that I can send a text message, pick up the phone, and someone will either get back to me right away if they don't answer, it's just a good feeling.
Yeah, and that collegiality extends. I mean, I'm in Alberta. There aren't a lot of lawyers from Alberta on Twitter. It's Central Canada has the the market cornered on Twitter, at least. Recently, went through my first murder trial and as second chair, obviously, and so it was 6 weeks of exhaustion, and there were people in the courthouse. There were Crown defense just asking how things are going, and then oh man, I'm saying something nice about you again, Zach. Jesus, somebody slipped something into my iced coffee. And Zach actually reached out to me 2 or 3 times during the course of the trial.
I did. I do care. Now it's for the record.
And but things like that. I mean, we talked before about managing trauma, and that's a hugely important thing. And I find that one of my best friends is a classmate from law school, Laura McPhee. She works corporate, and I call her frequently when I know that I'm ready to check in, that I need to check in. And it's funny because we do that to each other, so we end up checking in relatively frequently, but it's a good way. So if you're at a stage where you think I could use a check-in, reach out to somebody else, because then you invariably end up sharing the burden, and it does help. And there are a number of lawyers in Ontario, Harpreet Saini, John Hale, Mike Spratt,
all great guys.
Yeah, and I'm only mentioning guys because I'm having a brain fart right now. But there are so many people that have opened either their inbox or their phone to reaching out, and sometimes it's about the mechanics of the job or specifics of practice, but often it's just John Hale, who's senior counsel. I have no right knowing who that guy is, but he's reached out to me to say, hey, how are you doing? So have other people who so it's fantastic, and when this job is going well, that happens a lot. When I started my practice, one of the things I set a goal as was being around senior lawyers that I could draw on for mentorship and support, and practice advice. So the building that where my office is, I rent in the same building as Walsh, Wilson, Jugnoth. So Gavin Walsh, Corey Wilson, Derek Jugnoth. And the three of them have been in practice, a decade-ish. And every single one of them, their office door is almost always open. And that's, for mentorship, professionally, personally, business standpoint, legal standpoint. So to those going out there, like, develop those mentorship roles, develop those friendships, because they're hugely important.
Yeah, community incredibly important, and Twitter is a bit of a hell site sometimes, but it has been good for that. I've made some fantastic friends, both in this business and out of it, that I can read. I just know I can reach out to them if I ever having a bad day or need advice.
For sure.
I want to just in the last few minutes kind of switch to some lighter topics just to end things on a high note here. Zach, you're pretty open about your hobbies on Twitter, which is
Sure
always fun,
am.
which is fun for me. But why don't you each talk about sort of some stuff you do outside of law to unwind, or just hobbies that you have to um, make it seem like your life isn't just being a lawyer all the time. Zach, how about you? Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I think just real quickly, I think, being someone who makes their whole personality being a lawyer, like that's not for me. I like to be
Yeah.
more than just what my job is. But yeah, one of the things I like to do is I like to paint models from games like Warhammer. Right now, I'm currently on a game fix called Infinity. And unfortunately, they're all primed to black over there. Bring one over, but you wouldn't be able to see. It's just kind of
Oh
an
yeah.
amorphous blob.
Hmm.
But yeah, I know. So painting and
Hmm.
playing tabletop games is kind of my go-to. Like I get to spend a lot of time with my brother, who's a doctor, and we both kind of like these
That's where the
rule-specific technical.
intelligence went.
Yeah, exactly. Or the oldest one, who's an engineer. So you
Oh
know,
wow.
two
Yes.
guys who know how to do math. Not so
Accomplished
much for
family.
me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely ate our Wheaties as a kid, as my mom would like to say. But yeah, like playing tabletop games and painting, like those are my two of my favorite ways to just either like blow off steam or kind of just kill like 3 hours. Like the other night, like Tuesday night, I started painting at 9. I looked up, it was midnight, and I was like, oh my god, I got to work tomorrow. What am I doing? Like I think these are good things, right? Like you find fun creative outlets with no stakes, and you have fun that way. It kind of gives you something else to talk about at the party, so to speak.
Yeah.
Chad, how about you?
Uh, so first, Zach, actually, we exchanged gifts towards the end of law school. Zach was kind enough to paint one of his characters, this little warrior for me, and knowing my heritage, he actually put a Métis sash on
Oh, very cool.
on the show. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I'm looking. It's actually sitting. My assistant steals it. It's sitting on her desk right now. But it was sitting on the table in front of me through the murder trial. So thank you very much for that, Zach. It's my little avatar. But my hobbies, I cycle. I like being out in the mountains. We're lucky to have that here. But I don't think anything's more relaxing for me than when I'm able to sit down with my sewing machine. And so I tailor my own clothes as much as I can. But I make camping gear, bags that go on your bike, or packs and things like that. It actually came up in a conversation on Twitter the other day. Um, I think it was Sarah who was talking about, the activities on job applications.
I think I
And
remember seeing that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and the discussion was focused on how, the quote unquote female activities, like sewing and baking and watching TV, whatever. I don't know if they'll care, whatever.
Yeah,
But
sort of
there
female
was
coded stuff is less
exactly.
respected.
Yeah, I mean, it was less respected. I mentioned sewing. I didn't do many interviews because that's not the crim law way. But when I meet lawyers, I talk about sewing. It's definitely not something that's frowned upon. It's like a novelty, and um, maybe the 6'2", 240-pound ex-cop at a sewing machine conjures up um, an image that's unexpected. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah,
I suppose it is a point
that's
of curiosity coming from someone unexpected, right?
yeah, exactly. So Teddy, what are your hobbies when you're not doing this and lawyering? what keeps you
Oh
calm?
geez. Well, I'm a huge nerd, as Zach and many other people know. I
Sure
play,
do.
yeah, I play tabletop games. I have a couple of Dungeons and Dragons groups going. I play video games as well. I got this big expensive computer, so I play lots of games on that. But I'm also, as much as I can in a place like Toronto, I try to get outdoors, go on hikes outside the city. I bike everywhere that I can. And I actually just signed up for a cross training gym in my neighborhood again. Finally,
Nice.
after a year and a half of being out of it because I just didn't feel comfortable up to this point in the pandemic. Finally, getting
Yeah.
back into training and doing some powerlifting and Olympic lifting there. So,
Good.
yeah, that's sort of it. Staying physically active is a big part of managing my own mental health personally. So it's good to get back to that.
Zach, let's spend the last couple of minutes flipping the table here. Let's interview Teddy. So Teddy,
Yeah,
tell
let's
us
let's
about
flip
All
flip
right,
this
so
yeah,
that's
around.
enough. We
so
have
tell
run
us
out of
about your practice,
time.
Teddy.
Thank you so much to
Tell
both
us
of you for coming by.
Uh,
Chad, something I did mention at the top of the show was you were supposed to come on several months ago, but we preempted it because, the news of discovery of mass graves, of course, did not feel appropriate. And then I
and
was about to go on hiatus anyway, so we put it off. So thank you so much for being available to come back,
oh,
Zach,
and
and thank you for joining too.
thank you for that. Show
Absolutely.
respect, and um,
Mhm.
I'll be in Toronto on the 19th and 20th. I'm going to go down for the
So
CLA
November.
Fall Conference, November. Yeah,
Hmm.
November 19th and 20th. So thinking I don't know anybody in Toronto except everybody on Twitter. So maybe I don't know. There used to be things called tweet ups, Twitter folks that meet. Maybe we should look at arranging one of those.
Yeah,
That'll give
sure.
Zach an excuse and Teddy, all of us an excuse to say hi in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Zach, if you can make it into town, that'd be great. We'll definitely try
Hmm.
to find a bar or something. So, announcement of new guest is coming up soon. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Next week will be a gaming stream. I think Zach, you'll be joining for that. Going to
Yeah, I will.
shoot some zombies for some Halloween fun, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you in person, Chad. And hope everyone has a great
Absolutely.
night.
You too. Thanks for the invite,
Thanks.
Teddy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. Thank you both.